Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 3, Chapter 26. Fundamental Principles of Material Nature, Text 28. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya.
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 Yadvidur Yanurudyakyam.
Yadvidurhi Aniruddhakyam.
Rishikaram Madishwaram.
Rishikana Madishwaram.
Saradendi Varasyamam.
Saradene Dvarashyama.
Samradhyam Yogi Virshanai.
Samridyam Yogi Visanai.
Yadvidaryani Rudyakyam.
Yadvidurhi Aniruddhakyam.
Rishikalam Madishwaram.
Rishikana Madishwaram.
Saradendi Varasyamam.
Saradene Dvarashyama.
Samradyam Yogi Vishanai.
Samradyam Yogi Visanai.
Yadvidaryanarudyakam.
Yadvidurhi Aniruddhakyam.
Rishikalam Madishwaram.
Rishikana Madishwaram.
Saradendi Varashyamam.
Saradene Dvarashyama.
Samradyam Yogi Vishanai.
Samradyam Yogi Visanai. Yadvidurhi Aniruddhakyam. Rishikanamadishwaram. Sharidene Dvarashyamam. Samridyam Yogi Visanai.
Yadvidurhi Aniruddhakyam.
Rishikanamadishwaram.
Saradandi Varashyamam.
Saradeni Virashyamam.
Samradyam Yogi Vishanai.
Radyam Yogi Vishane. Yadvidurhi Anuruddhakyam. Rishikana Adhishwaram. Sharadendi Varashyamam. Samradhyam Yogi Vishane.
Yad.
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 Which mind?
Which mind?
Vidu.
Vidu.
Is known.
Is known.
He. Indeed.
Indeed.
Aniruddha Akyam.
Akyam.
By the name Aniruddha.
By the name Aniruddha.
Rishikanam.
Rishikanam.
Of the senses.
Of the senses.
Adishwaram.
Adishwaram.
The supreme ruler.
The Supreme Ruler.
Sharada. Atama. Indivara.
Indivara.
Like a blue lotus.
Like a blue lotus.
Shyamam.
Shamam.
Bluish.
Bluish.
Shamradyam.
Shamridyam.
Who is found?
Who is found?
Yogi V.
Yogi B.
By the yogis.
By the yogis.
Shanai.
Sanai.
Gradually. Translation: the mind of the living entity is known by the name Lord Aniruddha, the supreme ruler of the senses. Possesses a bluish form resembling a lotus flower growing in the air. He is found slowly by the yogis, known as purple. The system of yoga entails controlling the mind, and the Lord of the mind is Aniruddha. They state that Aniruddha is four-handed, one sun, Sudarshan Chakra, conch shell, club, and lotus flower. There are 24 forms of Vishnu, each differently named. Among these 24 forms, Shankar, Shiva, and Vasudeva are depicted very nicely in the Chaitanya and Charitamrita, where it is stated that Aniruddha is worshipped by the yogis. Meditation upon avoidance is a modern invention of the third line of some speculator. Actually, the process of yoga meditation as prescribed in this verse should be fixed upon the form of Aniruddha. And meditating on Aniruddha, one can become free from the agitation of acceptance and rejection. And when one's mind is fixed upon Aniruddha, one gradually becomes God who loves. He approaches the pure status of Krishna consciousness, which is the ultimate goal of yoga. Shri Chaitanya Manavishtam Staptikam Yena Putale Swami Dhammayam Dadanti Swavadanti Kadam Nam Vishnu Palaya Krishna Krishnaya Bhutale Shri Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Acharya Dev Sesa Sundari Pasyatya Nistarine Panchakalpatarudishya Purasindhu Devasya Vitanam Bhavadevyo Vaishnavevyo Namo Namaha Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Srivasadi Gaur Bhaktivedanta Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama Rama Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Where did everybody go?
I think they went to get water.
Hmm?
They went to get water.
Water. I don't need any water. I don't need any water. I don't need any water. No water. Yeah, I don't need water.
I'll call
I
him.
don't need water.
I'll call him.
I don't need water. Ever seen? There's something to do.
Bhoga.
Hmm?
Bhoga. I have to remove the bhoga.
Oh, okay, yeah, of course. So, you went for water.
I think so, yes.
If people don't ask, they should ask, do you want water before they run out? Okay. Where do you go?
In the kitchen, I should call him.
No, then you get lost. And nobody. Who's late? And so, the mind of a living entity is known by the name Lord Aniruddha, the supreme ruler of the senses, who possesses a bluish black form resembling the lotus flower growing in the oil. Is found slowly by the yogis. Yadvidoya Nirudakyam Vishikanam Madishwaram Sharadandivara Shamam Samradhyam Yogi Shalai. And he's lost. I don't know why they do that. It's weird. I'll tell you a little cherry number to give you something. Cherry number is over there.
No, it's not prepared, Maharaj yet.
They didn't do it.
Yes. Okay.
A very powerful chapter. One of the most scientific chapters in the entire Srimad Bhagavatam, very scientific. Spiritual scientific. Okay. I got one. You missed the beginning, you missed the beginning.
He went to get his son Mukunda.
Oh,
He told me he's on the way.
oh, okay. All right, so as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita in the 6th chapter, it's called Jnana Yoga. So one should elevate themselves by the mind and not degrade themselves. The mind is the friend of the conditioned soul and its enemy as well. It also says in the next verse that one who controls the mind is the best friend. And one who fails to do so is very out of line and becomes his enemy. So people decide enemies and friends outside. Prahlad Maharaj was challenged by his father, Kasipuri. Father said, "You're siding with my enemy," meaning Vishnu. And Prahlad said, my dear father, the only enemy is your own mind. Now that is a statement that has an absolute principle. When the mind is controlled, the mind is a friend. When the mind is not controlled, it creates all kinds of havoc. And it even imagines many things that are not even there. That's the nature of the mind. So it says, the mind of a living entity, this is not the conditioned mind, but the real mind. The soul also has body, form, mind, intelligence, and senses. But the living entity's mind is actually known as Aniruddha. He possesses a bluish black form. It's a lotus flower growing in autumn. And it says here the yogis focus a lot on worshiping Aniruddha because they perform various types of meditation. So in order to control the mind, one has to engage the mind. There's an artificial program of trying to control the mind by stopping the activities of the mind, which are done by tapasis and various others. They try to detach the mind from all thoughts. But that's not possible because the living entity is by nature a sentient being. And thoughts will come automatically, even if you don't want them. Even there are 3 states of consciousness: dreaming, sleep, and streaming, deep sleep, and waking. Waking, we're using the mind always, and it's very active. And even in the dreaming state, the mind is active. It's going in different places. And when we're in deep sleep, the mind is also working, but because of the level of consciousness at that particular connection or that deep sleep, one is not aware of the movements of the mind, although it's still moving. So the mind is always active, 24 hours a day, constant. That's why it says that people who work with their mind generally get more tired than people who work with their physical body. Of course, you need both, but those who are more mental, they also find themselves needing more rest. Because the mind is an organ, and it gets tired through use. That is the conditioned mind. So it is also mentioned that the control of mind is the foundation by which the yoga system works. Without controlling the mind, one cannot make any progress in devotional service. And there's 3 ways to control the mind. 2 are recommended. One is also a consideration. It's more like a concession. And that is 3 ways to control the mind. One is to engage the mind in acts and activities of devotional service. That's what is mentioned here. When the mind is engaged in activities of devotional service, although it's very active, it's controlled because it's directed on a platform where there is no movement. On the spiritual platform, everything is existing. Material energy is always constantly changing and moving, therefore the mind is also moving. So the best and recommended way, as Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, that one should practice controlling the mind by engaging the mind in devotional service. Says there's another way to control the mind, and that is to engage it and to think of or remember the instructions of the spiritual master. That is a constant meditation. What is the instructions of the spiritual master? That manifests in activities also. So if we're always thinking, what is the instructions of the spiritual master? The mind is controlled. And the third way, it's also mentioned to work for the benefit of others. So even in the material world, people perform activities for the benefit of others, and their minds are somewhat fixed on that idea or that principle. So that is also there. Of course, working for the benefit of others in Krishna consciousness means to find ways to give Krishna consciousness to others. The mind has to be controlled. The mind is not consciousness. Consciousness is the soul. The imprints that come upon the mind are actually the blemishes over the pure consciousness. The example would be given that in the sky there are different elements. There are birds, there are airplanes, clouds, planets. The sky is not touched by these. The sky is completely distinct from everything that's in the sky. So consciousness is spiritual and it's not affected by the images that come up on the mind, but it appears to be. Why? Because the consciousness is directed towards something material. But consciousness is pure because consciousness is the nature of the soul's existence. And consciousness is the symptom of life. Wherever there's consciousness, there's life. And so one has to place within the pure consciousness pure activities, and that is devotional service. So keeping the mind engaged in devotional service is not an easy thing. Because the mind is chanchal, hivana Krishna pravati bhavadara. Tasya mam vinam manye vayor idam saduskaram. Arjuna speaks this verse. And what is he saying? That Krishna, you're asking me to control the mind, but I think it's like trying to control the wind. And steady, it's unsteady, it's strong, turbulent. And Krishna acknowledges what Arjuna says, but then in the next verse, he responds, Abhyasena tu kontaya, vairagya chidriyate. So what is he saying? By constant practice, this is the point, and by detachment from material activities, one can control the restless mind, although it's very difficult to control. We see just a little bit of deviation in the mind. Great yogis have fallen down. We had somebody moving. He was meditating underwater for many years. And then he just saw two different fish copulating. His mind started to focus on that. There was an attraction that developed, and he left his meditation on that. Leaving everything and then getting married and married 50 wives. That's a story in the ninth canto. The story of Subhadra Muni. But it's an example of how even great yogis, they try to control the mind, but something is because unless they can actually place the mind on the spiritual platform, it's not possible to control the mind. What does it mean to place the mind on the spiritual platform? For example, we have the example of Vishwamitra Muni, powerful Muni, very powerful Muni. And he wanted to perform austerities. So he undergoes really rigorous austerities. In the winter time, he would immerse himself up to his neck in ice cold water and meditate. In the summertime, he would sit in the middle of 7 fires all around him and meditate under the hot blazing sun. But then Indra saw that this person is performing great austerities, perhaps he's trying to get my position. So Indra decided to try to divert his attention away. So he said one society named Menaka. And Menaka came, and simply by the tickling of her ankle bells, he became distracted. And then he developed an attraction for Menaka, and he left his meditation, got married, and there was a daughter born named Sakuntala. And that's a nice story. The life of Sakuntala, how she was the daughter of a son and a daughter of a father and mother that she actually practically never knew. And she got married to one great king named Bharat Maharaj. Not the Bharat as we hear in the seventh canto, fourth canto, but another Bharat Maharaj. So that's a beautiful story. That's one of the classics in India, the life of Sakuntala. But now Vishwamitra Muni, he was now thinking, I became distracted, broke my meditation. But this time I'm not going to do that. So he went back and performed his meditation again the same way. And Indra sent another society girl named Ramba. And again, he hears the tickle of the ankle bell. But this time, instead of becoming attracted, he gets angry. And in his anger, fire comes out of his eyes because of the power of his meditation. And he burns her to ashes. She becomes a burnt recorder. Nobody could take the shot at that particular time. So, this is the other side of attraction. It's called aversion. So one becomes attracted or averse, it is another form of attraction. One has to learn to become detached and coherent, unaffected by happiness and distress, fixed in the activities of the emotional system. And the mind can only be fixed when it is engaged in the emotional system. Sometimes it looks like the non-devotees are controlling their mind by being absorbed in their material activities. But not really, because under the influence of the three modes of material nature, the mind is always moving from one situation to another. Because material energy is always it's moving, and therefore the mind is also becoming affected by the movements of the material energy. And therefore, one cannot control their mind. Sometimes they make an effort to control their mind. Nowadays, they write books on mind control. They call it mindfulness, right? Mindfulness, instead of mindness. Mindness means you're spaced out. And mindfulness means you're full within the mind. But who cares about being full of the mind? Because it's just another form of Maya. And therefore, the only way to control the mind and to reveal the real mind by controlling the mind and the senses in devotional service. One starts to uncover the real mind, the transcendental mind, which is mentioned here as Aniruddha. And Aniruddha is beautiful. And when the mind becomes purified, one can see the beautiful form of Aniruddha. As it's mentioned here, because there's a bluish black form resembling the lotus flower growing in the autumn. So the yogis, they try to achieve that consciousness. So one has to practice this mind control. The best way is to have strong sadhana. By having strong sadhana, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, reading Srimad Bhagavatam, hearing Bhagavatam, and engaging in some meditation prayers. We chant in the morning, we Guru Vastika prayers. We chant Tulsi prayers. We chant Guru prayers. There's Bandhan prayers. So prayers are a way to focus the mind and purify the mind. And then when we perform our day-to-day activities, the mind is fixed. It's not jumping from here to here and there according to what happens in the external environment. So therefore, mentions in the Bhagavad Gita, in the 17th chapter, there are austerities of the body, austerities of the mind, austerities of speech. These are the three forms of austerities. Austerities of the mind are serenity, simplicity, gravity. Gravity is one of the more powerful principles. When a person is absorbed in thought, one cannot understand the nature of that person's thought, even though one may try to guess, they'll never get it. Usually great souls practice this process of gravity. Usually they go deep into thought on something spiritual or on the nature of the Supreme Lord. Gravity also helps to purify the mind and keeps the mind fixed on the principles of devotion. Serenity, not agitated by happiness and distress, is called dira. Some things come and they makes us happy. As Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, one who is not disturbed by happiness and distress, one is fixed, one is on the transcendental platform. What is the actual verse? It's in Bhagavad Gita 5:20. Priyam Priya, Dvajya, Priyam Chapriya, Stira Priya, Hamuro, Brahmani Brahmana Stira. One who is not elated in happiness, nor is depressed and something distressed. Did you find it 5:20? Bhagavad Gita 5:20. Not prayasya priyam pratyam no jude pratyam stira samudra. A person who neither rejoices upon achieving something pleasant, nor laments upon attaining something unpleasant. Who is self-intelligent, who is unbeatable, who knows the science of God, is always situated in transcendence. And Prabhupada said, these are the sutras of the self-realized soul. And so part of that is one is not moved by happiness and distress. It's like someone asked Prabhupada question. They were praising Prabhupada in a certain way. Glorified Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, they asked him a question about his spiritual prowess. Prabhupada said, yes, I'm not moved by the rascal scientists. I'm not moved by the rascal scientists. People listen to these, what goes on in the news, scientific, new inventions, this is that, this is all garbage. Prabhupada said, we said, whatever Krishna says, that's all we need to know. And Krishna says you're Muga, so we say the same thing. Prabhupada is just repeating Krishna. People will say, oh, you're speaking so strongly of Krishna. Prabhupada, I'm not, I'm just speaking what Krishna says. You're a fool. Avajanti mam duha. Manusin tamanasana bhava bhava jnana tamama bhutamais. Fools do right. Naham prakasha sarvasyam yoga maya samadhita. I'm covered by my curtain of Maya, and the bewildered world knows me not, who are unborn and inexhaustible. Yeah, so Krishna, Prabhupada said that we take all of our information from Krishna. Of course, sometimes for practical things, we also look for some things on a practical level. But generally, for our practice in spiritual life, we don't need anything but the words that appear to the spiritual master who guides us towards Krishna by his pure devotion. So chastity of the mind is one of the qualities of the devotee. Not running here and there looking for opportunities to find sense gratification in various types of activities, keeping the mind fixed in the activities of devotional service. One of the things we learned when we first joined the Hare Krishna movement is keep your mind always engaged in devotional service 24 hours a day. We were brahmacharis living in the ashram, so we were given that direction as a way to, and we found that it is very helpful to practice that. Always watch, it says the devotee always watches his mind, see where it's going. And if he's always moving it towards Krishna, he sees it going somewhere else, and he check if he retains it, and moves it. But the mind is very difficult to control. The example that's given in the Bhagavad Gita is a picture. It's a chariot, and on the chariot there's two persons, the driver and the passenger. There are 5 horses, and then there are reins connecting the driver to the horses. The chariot is the body, the horses are the senses, the reins are the mind, the driver is the intelligence, and the passenger is the soul. When the passenger is being pulled, the soul, by the mind and the senses. But when the intelligence is strong and fixed on truth, on eternal religious principles, then the intelligence guides the mind towards the eternal, or towards the spiritual. One has to practice them. It's not easy to control the mind. We have many examples where sometimes the mind will just, for no reason, come up with some very, what we say, unimaginable thought also just appears within the mind for no reason. This may be due to impressions that we have and that happen maybe in different lifetimes. And sometimes these things come to the surface. It's understood that we use only about 10 to 15% of our mind. Depending on the strength of our bhakti, we use that much more. Most of the mind is in the unconscious state. And in that unconscious state are all of our experiences in previous lives. They lie dormant. And there's emotions, there's experiences, there's desires, all of it lies mostly in the unconscious part of the mind. You might say, you can compare the mind to like a computer. What you see up on the screen is what's happening at the particular time. But you know, within the hard drive, there is so much information piled there. And just by plugging certain buttons, you bring up other information. So the computer is really patterned, the manufacture of the computer actually patterned after the mind. The mind is not necessarily only what happens at the time of your experience. There's a large amount of experiences, information, and various other aspects of the mind that lays in the dormancy. And so these can come out, they can be triggered by certain experiences or certain situations, certain people trigger these different minds, and they come to the surface. And then we experience something that we're not familiar with. But it's there in the unconscious mind. And in order to keep ourselves safe, we block out a lot of that and we just focus on what is important. But you should always remember that any environmental stimuli can, again, spark the mind to think in that way. And we have many examples. Ajahn, he deviated his mind just a little, and his whole life was changed. Simply by that attraction to a prostitute. Everything changed. He gave up his spiritual practice, and he became a debauch. Fortunately, by the arrangement of the Lord, he was pulled back at the end. But he suffered his whole life. So we can see there are many examples in the scriptures, Bart Maharaj and Faras. It appears that what he was experiencing wasn't so detrimental, but it proved to be in the long run. He was just living in the forest. He had given up his kingdom, everything. And now he was finishing his life. He had reached the platform of Baba, very high platform of spiritual, really affectionately in the mood of devotion to Krishna. But then he saw there was a deer, and she was walking along, and she came to a stream, and all of a sudden a lion roared really loud, scared the deer. She jumped across the stream. But the deer was pregnant, and a doe was born by the jumping, came out of her womb, and then the deer ran away. Now there's this little baby doe, just newborn. He sees it, Bart Maharaj sees it. He thinks, oh, this big doe doesn't have a mother, so I have to take care of it. So he did, but at the expense of his spiritual practice. That was deep. He gave up his practice, his meditation, his prayers, and his sadhana just to put all his attention on taking care of this little deer. It wasn't wrong that he was taking care of the deer. What was wrong is that he substituted caring for the deer and gave up his spiritual practice. And because of that, he developed an attachment to the deer on a material level. And when he died, he was thinking of that deer. And therefore, he had to take birth as a deer in his next life. But because he was such a great soul, Krishna gave him awareness of how he became a deer while he was a deer. And that he didn't associate with other deers. He just would go around the sages and listen to them speak. He would just be by the sages listening. And then after giving up that deer body, he had to take another birth as Jet Bart. And in order not to get affected by the material energy, he became deaf and dumb. Although he wasn't, he just refused to respond to anything. He didn't even talk. And his father was thinking, what's wrong with him? He's just a dullard. But he was highly Krishna conscious. He was absorbed in thinking of the Lord all the time. And he just didn't respond to anything material. He would do everything the opposite. When it came to taking prasada, he would wash his hands. He wouldn't wash his hands before prasada, only after. So, and his brothers thought he was useless. They just put him in the forest and let him go there. And he would walk around naked. People would spit on him and throw rocks at him and everything. But he wasn't disturbed by that, because he was practicing this idea of being undisturbed by happiness and distress, because he understood from his previous life that when he saw something, it simply diverted his attention away from the Supreme One. Of course, he can read the whole pastime. Ultimately, he preached a great king. So this is how the mind in any situation can be, we say, sparked to something. We see many great souls around the world, and even in our movement, they make a lot of progress in devotional service, but then something happens, just like that. one of our sannyasis. He was sannyasi for about 30 years, practicing very strictly, very shastric. And then all of a sudden, he gets a letter from his daughter, because when he left his wife and daughter when she was 4 years old, and he just went to take sannyasi like everything. And now his daughter tracked down her father and found him. And so she came. And so he was cordial to meet his daughter. But she was a gross materialist. She was smoking cigarettes and all kinds of nonsense. But now, all of a sudden, after practicing sannyas for so many years, now his daughter's back. So what he did was somehow or other, he was, fortunately, because of the strength of his bhakti, he preached to her as much as he could, but kept very strong in his own Krishna consciousness. But there was a deviation when he had to deal with her, and it was really difficult. So these are examples, and it explains that when you become very serious in Krishna consciousness, Indra especially thinks, oh, he's performing all of these spiritual activities. He's trying to get my post in the heavenly planets. Yeah, the demigods think like that. Mentions in the Shastras. And then Indra will do something. Usually he sends your old girlfriend, maybe somebody who were there like when you were just a kid. Your old girlfriend comes back again. Hi, you remember me? All of a sudden you're thinking, what am I going to do now? So these are the demigods who say they test you, but they're usually afraid of losing his post as he sees. If somebody makes an advancement that he can qualify for high positions in the heavenly planets. So yeah. So this is an example of the mind. So there's an old saying, never trust the mind. Always distrust. Prabhupada gives that lecture and he speaks about this. He said, where is that statement coming from? It is not written, but it is current. In other words, it is a principle that is being spoken by great souls. Never trust your mind. Always distrust. Because the mind at any time can cheat you. And there's a whole series of verses in the 6th chapter of the 5th canto where it says that just like when you chase a wild horse and you somehow capture it, you tie it up, you're very diligent to make sure that horse doesn't break away again. And so Krishna also explains the importance of controlling the mind. He gives a formula. He says controlling the mind is like controlling a horse. Krishna speaks in the 11th canto. He says, just like if you want to control a horse, you have the reins to pull it. But if you pull the reins too hard, the horse jumps. And if you keep loose on the reins, the horse will go everywhere you want. So you have to learn how to control the mind in a way that it won't jump, but at the same time, it's not going to go where it wants to go. So the strength of the intelligence fixed on spiritual. The intelligence guides the mind to push the devotion of students. And Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati gives another, he says, your mind is a non-devotee. Mind is a non-devotee. He's a materialistic mind. So When you hear that, you think, my mind is a non-devotee. That means I'm not supposed to associate with non-devotees. You're supposed to associate with devotees.
Yes.
So, therefore, what is the principle? You have to make your mind a devotee. And so you can associate with them. That is the practice. And that comes with good side, good living. You don't make
Out here, and then they get distracted by ankle bells or by seeing somebody.
because you're not fixed on Krishna, fixed on the yoga process. Yoga process is rules, regulations, austerity, and various stages. It's like yama, niyama, pratyahara, ayama, niyama, asana, pratyahara, pranayama, dhyana, and samadhi are the eightfold mystic processes of yoga. So unless one is very diligent in each one of these stages, they can't reach samadhi. The slight deviation throws the whole thing off. But one has to focus their attention on the activities of emotional service or on Krishna or on the form of the Supreme Personality. Otherwise, the mind has no anchor. Austerities doesn't anchor the mind, it simply allows the mind to become detached from certain activities. But you see that Vishwamurti movement usually understand usually sound when something that is very pleasant, he was to be. So it says a ludicrous shade of Pradanti. Because yogis, they climb very high on the spiritual plane, because they don't engage in devotional service. Devotional service is established on the spiritual plane. It's not in the where the process of yoga is going through the different stages, from ignorance to passion, from passion to goodness. From goodness to a type of transcendence that meditates on the unmanifested form of the yoga, or the deity. And Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita, Kleshana, so he said that process, although it can be successful, is very arduous and very difficult. And so the best and most direct and easiest process for controlling the mind and achieving perfection in yoga is bhakti. Is that verse? Yoginam Vasantara Vesam Madhyatanatmanaham Sarvam Vajate Yomam Kene Yuta. Krishna explains that of all of the yogis, the bhakti yogi is the best because they're fixed on being Krishnas, which is the goal of all yogis. But these other yoga systems, they don't have Krishnas. They have something impersonal, unmanifested form of the actual truth, or some idea of detaching themselves and becoming free from all types of thoughts. Therefore, whatever they achieve is temporary. Only when you focus on it can the mind be gradually moving in the right direction. Otherwise, it's never steady. I mean, there are yogis, tapas use it before severe austerity, but what do they gain? They gain some liberation, they gain some freedom from material stuff. But they have to come back again because they're not fixed on the absolute truth. Unless they go from that stage higher, which they can do by taking up devotional service. Examples, the four Kumaras. The four Kumaras, they were Brahmavadis, they weren't Mayavadis. In other words, they had achieved Brahma realization. And simply by smelling the tulsi leaves, sandalwood with paste, offered to the lotus feet of the Lord, they attained to the stage of bhakti. In other words, they developed an attraction to the Lord. And then they engaged in bhakti. So that's an example of how those who are not trying to gain something through the yoga process can also be elevated. But Mayavadis and most impersonalists, they still have material desires and they're trying to fulfill their material desires through spiritual practice. That Prabhupada would say, Parmis, yogis, jnanis, they all have personal desires. The devotee is free from them. The devotee wants to please Krishna, purify their hearts, go back to the spiritual world. Yeah, because they're not fixed on the Supreme Lord, and they can't remain steady in the practice of yoga. Even if they do achieve perfection according to the word of life, you can't maintain it unless they engage in devotion. That's why the Lord Brahma says that first, Arun Krishna Pradantiya, begin with full name.
Do they have devotional service in Swargaloka?
Swargaloka. There's a worship of the Supreme Personality of God, and that's mentioned in the Brihad Bhagavatam. As Gopal Kumara was going to the different levels, came through Swargaloka also, and there was a form of Lord that was being worshipped there. I think that form of the Lord is, I'm not sure. But Yoga, Yoga, one of the four types of yoga. But yeah, there is a manifested form of the Lord that's being worshipped. It's usually a Vishnu form.
But Maharaj, Vaman, they always live in Swargaloka, right, Maharaj? With Indra.
Subhamana,
Yeah, like there was benefit.
yeah.
So they know that he's a supreme personality of God and they don't worship him.
I don't know any Shastic reference for that particular statement, but they may. But they usually worship the Vishnu form of the Lord. That is mentioned there. Because there's different levels. There's Jnanaloka, Tapaloka, Mahaloka. What is it?
Janaloka. Janaloka.
Janaloka, Tapaloka, Mahaloka. And ultimately Satyaloka. So on each of these levels, there's a particular form of the Lord that is worshipped. Here's one of the Vishnu. Here's okay.
I have one question. Go ahead. Maharaj, Generally, I have heard in some classes saying that ego is the topmost of intelligence and mind, and ego can also bypass intelligence. Like Daksha, example was given as Daksha when Daksha was criticizing Lord Shiva. He was telling the statement that I am not telling this in the envy, but I'm saying because he was my his son-in-law, he should respect me. But ultimately, his ego was speaking, but he was not even aware of that. So ego can control mind, right, Maharaj? Then how to come out of that situation where we don't even realize that ego is controlling our thoughts?
Well, ego is a designation on everything that's material. Real ego is viewed as supervised Krishna. There is a real ego that we are internal part and part of the Krishna. So the subtlety of ego, I would suggest you read about the Kirtan's book, measure number 4,
Hmm.
which is all about the false ego. But the false ego will trick you. And you'll make you think that you're doing everything. And you want to take credit for that. And then you can see that because of you it's happening. It's not you. And using the false ego.
Very wonderful class, Maharaj. Especially, you give so many wonderful examples from Shastras. Starting from Saubhari Muni, talking about Bharat Maharaj's fall down. We also talked about Vishwamitra Muni. We also talked about diversion and all. One thing which came to my mind, and I was just thinking, sorry, I shouldn't use the word mind. One thing which I was thinking about is these fall downs actually are portrayed in our life in terms of our consciousness. It's not that, like you talked about Abhyas and Vairagya. So these examples, when we talk about Saubhari Muni, Vishwamitra Muni, they actually exist within us also because I'm thinking about myself. There are so many temporary fall downs.
Yeah, that's true. This example, yeah. Many of us fall down in the mind. But fall down in the mind means we can somehow erase that by picking it up and engaging the mind in Krishna consciousness. But when fall down in the mind becomes strong, then it can also lead to speech and action. And then the fall down will have an offensive. Become an offense. So yeah, so you have to be careful. Watch the mind. Watch what it's doing.
You also mentioned that point of hard drive, Maharaj, that whatever is shown on the screen, that's basically a byproduct of whatever impressions I have acquired in my past lives. Like even when we hear about Ajamil's pastime, the, there was another thing I think I read, I don't remember the exact words, where it talks about it's not that Ajamil fell down. One, of course, he saw that Shudra and Shudrani are associating, but that was the reason of his past lives impressions, which made it even worse. And that's how his whole life led to a sinful life. I was thinking about, I'm also carrying so many past lives impressions, and they keep haunting me all the time. Though I know the goal is not to actually get distracted, but
Don't feed them by thinking.
Hmm.
As soon as you think about them, even if you're thinking in them to perspective, with understanding of negativity, you're feeding it. As soon as they appear in the mind, just push them out. Take a push them the whole room.
Amazing.
And then when you allow something in your mind,
Hmm.
you can work with this. For instance, I'll give you an example how there are people in the world, they want to remove evil in the world. And their desire to remove evil means that they're always meditating on evil people and evil activities. So they also pick up that energy themselves and become effective.
Krishna. Maybe it's like if I understand the meaning of nirvana, it will be like when the mind is completely not a, we know it's not a friend, but when you just conquer the mind, that will feel like a nirvana, Maharaj, isn't it?
Yeah, we have to be convinced that Krishna consciousness is there. It's hard because especially when you're out in the material environment, you're exposed to so many things. Some things attract our interest, attention. Some things are seem to be relevant to us on the material front, to help us in our material life. But we have to deal with these things in a detached way. That's the way. That means you're just using whatever is behind. Our sources of happiness is Krishna consciousness, not anything outside.
A very wonderful class, Maharaj.
Okay, we still have 20 seconds left. Like 108 minutes, 1 hour and 8 minutes.
One mistake leads to so much of chaos, Maharaj.
It's like devotees get a little bit, they deviate, and then they think, well, that's as far as I deviate. When you deviate, it's further than you. Go a little bit.
Yeah, either Keshav always says Maya will take drop by drop, not like a whole.
Yeah, she knows you can't do that all at once for the devotees. So it's
Remember that example also, right, Maharaj? There was one camel, and there was the owner of the camel, and they were going in the sand area, and then in the night it was pretty cold. So he set up his tent, and then he said, "I'll sleep." And the camel said, "Can I put my head a little? It's very cold out. Can I put my head little inside the camp because the shade?" Because he built the shade so that he can sleep there. And then the camel says, "Can I put my head inside?" And he says, "Okay." And then he says, "Oh, I'm feeling little cold. Can I come little more in?" He said, "Okay." And then after a few hours, he realized he's feeling really cold. So he realized he's actually out of the tent, and actually the camel is sleeping inside the tent. Just thinking about that analogy.
Yeah. You give her an inch, she'll take another inch. Actually, she'll take it. Yeah, that's why you have to be very strict and allow and engaging the mind, keeping the mind focused. But Maya, and especially in Western society, it's called the weapons of mass distraction.
So much distraction. Good.
So many weapons of mass distraction. It's distracting the mind somewhere. And Maya is always there in the female foremost to track the mind, which is the most powerful weapon of the mind. The scriptures say that a man's form is designed for self-realization, and a woman's form is designed to distract the mind from self. Good. So yeah, but everyone can become a Christian. Practice accordingly. Even anyone, even Lord Chaitanya took 2 dogs back to that. So, but he showed that the soul is there also. So be very careful. And practice that. This is, I give a whole seminar on the mind.
Okay.
Yeah, I have a whole series of classes that I've been given over. So I just touched on a little bit of it.
So we need that topic in retreat, Maharaj. Next time when you come here.
It can be done as a seminar here.
Yes.
Mhm. Yeah. I was advised to go deeper into that subject matter, which I haven't, I'm just taking it up to a certain point, but there's a lot to it. The whole sixth chapter of the year is all about the mind. The entire sixth chapter. Called Dhyana Yoga. When the mind is fully controlled, the self feels the soul. When the mind is fully controlled, super soul is automatically reached. And therefore, happiness and distress, honor and dishonor, heat and cold are all the same. One sees gold and pebbles as being the same as the others. And the mind is fully controlled. And there's only one way you can control the mind. The best way is to think of Krishna always. And the easiest way to do that is to chant Hare Krishna. Practice chanting Hare Krishna. Even when you're not doing it on the beats, practice off the beats. That's what Prabhupada was saying. 16 rounds on beats, innumerable rounds off the beats. Chant always. Practice. When you practice, then it becomes more easier. And if you have good sadhana in the morning, then it becomes even more easier than natural. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maharaj. His Holiness Chandramauli Swami Maharaj ki.
Yeah.
Prabhupada,
Yeah.
Bhagavatam.
Yeah.